Well, let's throw it open. What was the big takeaway? So Geelong's win yesterday was, I think, professional. I thought Hawthorn gave enough cheek to make it an Easter Monday game of great interest. They needed to because they've been disappointing of late. I like the fact that Sam Mitchell came out through the week and said, I got it wrong against Melbourne, the way we played. Everyone that watched that knew that, and he put it out there, and they played it, with a bit more flair and a bit more aggressive, but they just were too good. They're at different stages of their development. And I'll tell you what I loved about Geelong is, and I'm seeing it a fair bit, I saw it in Richmond, where the baton's been passed. It's been passed to the next generation. And for the Tigers, it's going to take a bit of time. But Geelong, Tanner Brunn's first half was just unbelievable.
His first quarter was unbelievable.
Jai Clark, through the middle of the ground, looks like he's more at home. So and then you got Dempsey, and then you got Ollie Henry's taking responsibility for Sicily. Holmes off half back. So they've done it again. The Cats
close.
They just keep them coming through. So
they're good. They've got very, very good, well-defined role players in that team, and they've got a bit of extra. I think they've got a bit of extra speed and ball movement.
Maybe, yeah.
Jeremy Cameron makes it really difficult. Do you go up all the way with him? Do you stay back and pick him up on the way back? Because he's a very good field kicker and he can sort of pick you apart by foot. There's a couple of really strong parts to their game that are hard to stop. And then I haven't even spoken about, Tom Stewart and what he can do and how he can disrupt you too.
We spoke to him on the couch last night, and we asked him about Chris Scott and his coaching. And I guess you've got to have the right group to be able to coach in this manner. But he said he just deploys players where he needs them. So Tom Stewart started on the wing, and then he just goes and
he
plays.
drifts and plays the seventh man.
At one stage, De Koning, the fullback, was rucking with Blitzarves as a ruck rover in the centre square at the same time.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So he's prepared to do it. He said he doesn't. He looks at the game and he sees it and he goes, Holmes was in good form, so he said, you go on the ball. I'm not going to leave you there. If you're the hot hand. I really like that style of coaching because it used to be.
You got to have the cattle to be able to.
No, 100%. But I think it's chicken and egg. You got to have the cattle to do it, but sometimes you won't find out that the cattle can do it unless you pull the trigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like back in our day, and I know, I don't want to talk about it, but it was okay. This bloke's a halfback flanker, and that's where he's going to play. And that you're a forward, and that's where you're going to play. Whereas Chris Scott says, no, I'm not going to put you in any category. You're good enough to be wherever the game needs you to be. And I love the way he coaches.
Why did we settle on the cattle? Why didn't we say you got to have the sheep, or you got to have the pigs? Why did we settle on the cattle?
You got to have the pigs to be able to play that way, and I liked it. And anyway, the Hawks were. So
their comeback though was
great.
Was full of merit. Yeah. It was the way that they started to play, and they started to get the ball out of the centre. And I thought the big fella Meek, I thought that he did a really good job in being able to protect where he wanted the ball drop to be at the centre bounce.
What about Damien Burke? How'd you see his game?
I saw Burkey. He did look like Burkey, didn't he?
I tell you what, and I think AFL Nation boys are saying the same. I'm sure people of our vintage all said the same thing. I turned the TV and I went, have a look at this bloke. That is a young Damien Burke, who was, for those that may not know, Brooks looking at us like we're stupid, was a ruckman back in the 80s and a good ruckman too. And he had a nice, mean, nasty streak.
I call his name is, I call him Twitty. Conway Twitty.
What's that mean?
Well, Conway Twitty. He was a country and western singer.
Never heard of him.
Yes, you have.
No, I have not.
Yes,
Never heard of that. What about, now listen, let's talk about Jack Ginnivan. Here's Sam Mitchell last night on Footy Classified. The question was put to him, then I want to get your thoughts.
But is there a modification that Jack Ginnivan needs to perform on himself?
Well, there's no question about that. But did Jack continue to exaggerate because he wasn't getting them, or was he not getting them because he was exaggerating? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Is that an open question?
To you and
Do you want me to answer that? Or
yeah, because in the end, you'll go, in the review, you go, yeah, there's some that he should have got and there's some that he absolutely contributed.
I think so. I think if you line it up against free kicks that were paid to others out on the ground, I think there was probably 2 or 3 that he should have got.
Yeah.
And then, but very late in the game, he was still trying to pull that trick on the boundary line in the pocket, whereby he was trying to raise the arm underneath the tackler and bring it up higher. So
he's a contributor.
I got some sympathy. I got some sympathy for the umpires, but
the umpires shouldn't. And I'm not saying they did, but it can look that way. They shouldn't go.
That's Jack Ginnivan.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a free kick.
Yeah,
he does have a head like everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. Because then you're going, okay, I'm going to hold this against the bloke for previous sins or for, fake. And it will be hard to do because everyone's human, And if you've paid a free kick that makes you as an umpire look like a bit of a pickle and you go to the umpires training and they go, here, he sucked you in and you're not going to umpire this week as a result. It shouldn't happen, but guess what? Next time they're going to go, I ain't falling for that one again.
Exactly. What about this as an idea for a reset for Jack Ginnivan, and that is the next time he plays in a short sleeve jumper, so he's not so obvious that it is Jack Ginnivan.
Well, I don't know. He's going to wear.
It's hard. It's hard when somebody obviously he's been doing this for a long time, so instinctively that's what he wants to do.
If I was his coach,
what would you do?
I'd get Jack.
Yep.
And I'd take him to the umpiring wherever the umpires are and say, listen, we want a clean start here. We want to wipe the slate clean. We admit to contributing to some of this. In our opinion, we think you guys have missed a fair few. Can we just have a clean slate here? And Jack's going to commit to playing the game on its merits. He's not going to, in his best endeavours, He won't try and lift the arm and lower the knees. Can you then commit to just judging him like everyone else?
That's part of it. I think the other thing needs to take place between the weekends, and that is that you get him out there and you put him through a series of exercises where he doesn't do that. He needs to get it out of his game.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. So I think there's...
The two things. I think your idea was okay, but I think my idea is slightly better. And that would be the thing that I'd be working on.
What was the best win from the weekend?
Yeah, the best win of the weekend, the best performance of the weekend.
I've got Richmond as the best win, Melbourne as the second best win, and I'll go with, I think, the Pies who just had to win. So there's my 3-2-1. Agree or disagree? There's no right or wrong. It's subjective. No. I thought Richmond's performance against an undefeated Sydney at the MCG on Sunday, given their issues, given the fact that Dustin Martin was out and Grimes and others, coming up against the red-hot Swans, who had only just 2 weeks prior to that knocked over Collingwood at the G in fine fashion, I thought their performance was superb.
Well said. And, the thing that was most impressive in my mind about that is I love it when a side loses the grip of a game.
Yes.
But then wins it back again. They did that. I reckon they did that twice throughout the course of the afternoon where you thought, okay, here comes Sydney now. Well, they score 6 goals.
6 unanswered goals
at one stage. And you thought, okay, well, they gave it their best shot because anyone can come out and they can huff and puff and do all that sort of stuff early in the game.
Yes.
But when the pressure comes back on you, what are you capable of doing as a team? What are your team leaders capable of doing? What are your mechanisms that you put in place in terms of changing it up to try and win back the momentum of the game?
Yep.
And they did that admirably at the weekend.
Great point. Melbourne's win was outstanding.
It was.
Against Port Adelaide when all the numbers suggest that Port should have won.
And that's the thing too, further to my point about Richmond, and that is when you go on the road like that and somebody gets off to a flyer like they did Port Adelaide in the way that they looked like the game was going to pan out, and you're fighting against the team, you're fighting against the crowd, and you're able to silence that and then just get into the trenches and then win enough footy so that you keep yourself in the game and then to come out on top like they did. You showed it last night on your little show, but conversion can make the difference, can't it?
Unbelievable.
Like they were tough shots that they took a goal. Yeah. They were like 50-50 shots, but they weren't easy kicks.
No way they weren't.
And they made them, and that was the difference in the end.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of irony when you really dig into that win. Melbourne have traditionally had more inside 50s, all that stuff we've talked about for a long time, and accuracy cost them dearly in finals last year, and they got the job done, so that was good. And then Collingwood, I took my hat off to Collingwood against Brisbane because there was no alternative for them, and they just went to work. Wasn't anything flash, it wasn't anything tactically brilliant. They just said, no, roll up our sleeves and get to work. And they also had moments where the game looked like it was going to slide from them, and they just dug in.
Season high, this was off your little show last night, effort or method, pressure rating, 195 for Collingwood, their season high.
So they laid
tackles that stuck though too.
Yeah, of all the tackles they tried to make in the first quarter, 88% stuck. Now that is a huge number. Which talks to mindset.
That's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset, Garry.
Well said, Whispers.
Well said to you too.
You're on fire today.
Essendon 186, their season high too. Now they need to maintain that rage. It's great. Like they came out and they talked about, the SEN edge, whatever that might be. It's more about aggression, but at the ball and at the contest. And that was apparent too. Having said that, fact about, you kick goals and you convert, that's the difference maybe in the Melbourne-Port Adelaide. I thought that St Kilda just shot themselves time and time again in that first half by not being able to convert.
Yeah, I did.
And not just on the scoreboard, but convert opportunities where they had options coming down the field and they had Essendon really open. They weren't able to hit their targets.
I agree with that. And we're agreeing a lot. And also, Essendon couldn't stick a tackle in that first half. We're talking about tackling. They got to St Kilda blokes, but didn't stick it. So for them to hang in and win was really admirable.
Hey, Matthew Nix, Adelaide are 0-3, then off to a great start. They just look off their tucker a little bit at the moment. This is what he had to say about them last night on 360.
At the moment, we're in a slump. We're in the dark at this point, really struggling with our game, but we'll find it.
Where do you shine it? They're in the dark at the moment. Can you put them in the light?
Just put it on wide. Don't put it on spotlight. Put it on wide, because they've all got to share where they're at. Their back half looks vulnerable. The midfield hasn't got any pop, and this big forward line that was the number one scoring team last year can't get out of their own way. So I think it's great that they're going to open up on on Thursday against Melbourne, where they'll be underdogs. Spotlights shining really harshly on them, and now there's nowhere to hide. So I'd expect a much better showing on Thursday night.
They weren't terrible against Fremantle with effort, though.
No, not effort, but it's connection. Score.
It's connection that they're struggling with at the moment. And down back, they've got a few pieces missing as well. Thilthorpe, in the little bits and pieces that sort of added to the overall picture for the Adelaide Crows. They're missing at the moment. So. But it wasn't an effort thing. It wasn't the players not having a crack. I thought they had a real crack.
Which could, for some people, be even more concerning.
Yeah. But sometimes
when you've turned
they turned the ball over, and they weren't as smooth and as organised going forward as what you would have liked. But there was a lot of pressure coming back the other way too. Fremantle are good. As I said earlier in the program, they surprised me. I think they've fixed up a lot of their ball movement stuff. I thought they were a bit stagnant and a bit stationary about the way that they wanted to go. But your great explanation before, they've got their pop back. That's what they've got, their pop back.
Can you use that on the Tiny Show on Wednesday for me?
I'm writing that down right now. They've got their pop back.
Well, and also they rely on the big Texan massively. Or they did last year, because he had one of the all-time seasons as a key forward, and Alex Pearce went to him, and Alex Pearce did what he's done to everyone this year, basically.
He's looking like one of the best defenders in the game.
Well, he's the All-Australian fullback at the minute.
Yep. There's a bit of competition there, but
Sam Taylor can play in the pocket, and Nick Vlastuin will be on the other one.
But he was good, and sometimes you are just being beaten by somebody who's a better player than you.
He looks off a bit. I mean,
he looks like a step off.
First game, and then he had that really tragic loss of his father-in-law. So emotionally, and if you're off a bit physically, and then the emotional turmoil comes into play, then all those things can conspire to you being not quite where you're at, and that's what it looks like for Tex. But he could pop on Thursday night.
He might get his pop back on Thursday night.
He might get his pop back. North have played the Giants.
Yep.
Undefeated. Mm-hmm. Freo. Undefeated. And who else did they play? Carlton. Undefeated. They've played the three undefeated teams, North Melbourne. That's a tough ask for a side that's just trying to make their way in the world.
It is.
Wouldn't have anticipated that Freo would be undefeated, I don't think.
No. And you've got not the slows on Freo, but
who's got the slows on?
No,
Freo?
You haven't got the slows on them, but you just at the moment you're parking your enthusiasm about them because you don't think they've beaten anyone.
I like what they're doing, but yes, I want to see them do them again. And couldn't have come at a better time against Carlton this week at Gather Round.
Yeah, but they play them. They do play them in a neutral territory, though. They do. But Carlton are good. Carlton are really good.
Yeah.
I know Carlton were good last year, but in some ways they might even. I think they might be better this year.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They're a really powerful, strong, at it type team whose game will stand up in finals because it's built around the contest, and they've got a lot of really strong physical players too. So that will serve them well. And they got Wittering was back at the weekend. Like he's such a
pivotal,
a stumbling block for any team that's trying to move the ball forward the way.
I know there's ridiculous money bandied around in footy these days, right? So anyway, it is what it is.
Yep.
The money's got to be paid. You got a salary cap. You got to pay the money. If you're North Melbourne, go and offer Sam Taylor $1.7 million. Not that he'd be out of contract, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. You've got to pay overs to get something that you don't have.
Well,
and somebody
and to get him to your club.
And somebody you know is already an established star of the competition.
What would they give for a Taylor or a Wittering? This and look, I talked to Johnny about this from Epping, of course. He's all about the defence, and we all are. We know that they're skinny. But you're just going to have to hold your nerve and then try and go and get one, as Melbourne did with May and Lever. When
that's right.
Melbourne were as low as North Melbourne, and they had to hold their nerve and then went and got two.
You either develop your own or you try and recruit someone from somewhere else that's already established. Hey, just quickly, I just want to mention this guy too. Yeah. And I know that he came on in the first game against the Brisbane Lions and did really well in the second half. But Jack Carroll, I watched him again at the weekend. Mm-hmm. Pick 41. I really like him. And I think there's still a lot of growth in him as a player too. So I think they've got something very good in Jack Carroll.
I agree with that as well. You and I are in violent agreement.
Have you got a question?
Why don't I ask you the question that you asked me to ask you?
What it is?
What happened to dissent?
Very good question. Very good question, because I think it's one of those rules that they went too hard on. And they've pulled way, 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 way back. Hardwick yesterday at the MCG was telling the umpire, after an iffy free kick, but he was telling the umpire to have a look up at the screen. Now, that was a 50-metre penalty.
But hang on.
At a stage in our game.
Okay.
And our rules are a little bit fluid from time to time.
Well, this is the thing. You bring up a magnificent point today. So, once upon a time, you pointed the guy, whatever. 50... Bang. So now we watch what's happening in footy and we go, okay, there's been a change. No one's told us. So we as a commentariat or the larger footy audience have got to make up you've got to work it out for themselves, right? Yep. And then you know what will happen, don't you? There'll be a vital game. Yep. It'll be the last 40 seconds. Someone will point to the thing. The umpire will go bang. And then how do you explain that? How can we explain that to anyone? You go, well, they go, oh, but I saw that other guy on Easter Monday do it, and the umpire just looked at him, and you go, yeah, well, you as a supporter or a viewer have got to make up your own rules. So you go, well, that wasn't important enough a game because Geelong were going to win anyway, so they're not going to make it there, but. When it's a big one like this, they'll umpire to the level of what?
Well, let me
ask Laura Kane.
Okay,
Laura, can you point to the scoreboard now with the umpires or not? That's a simple question.
What would you like the players to be able to do?
I would like the players to be able to know exactly what they are. Clearly, Blake Hardwick has got to the point.
Do you have a problem, though, with a player pointing up to the umpire and saying, look, have a look at that?
I think it's just grandstanding from a player's point of view.
Okay, so you would like to see that player penalised?
Well, I want the rules to be enforced. So we know. Right. Because you know what's...
Is there a dissent rule?
I promise you it's going to happen, Tim. It'll happen. There'll be a player... And he'll get an umpire who's in a bad mood or doesn't like the player or thinks the player's been a smart Alex. He'll go 50, and the umpire will go, "Hang on, mate." I was like the other million people watching footy on Easter Monday, and Blake Hardwick virtually turned the umpire's head and said, "Look at the scoreboard," and all the umpire did was, "No, mate, no free kick."
It's one of the vagaries of our game. The rules and how they're interpreted or how they're applied. The other one is the deliberate out of bounds or the insufficient attempt to keep the ball in play. And we saw this a lot yesterday at the MCG. And even when the rain came, and I reckon after that period of time, it was harder to keep the ball in play at times. And there should be I think there should be a relaxation of that. But having said that, are you in the camp where you would like to see the last person touch the ball out of bounds penalised?
Between the arcs.
Just between the arcs?
Yeah. Well, it is anyway. And I showed one last night.
You can imagine how long we might be going to umpire review, though, as to whether or not it was between the arcs.
Do you know the only kick that's not penalised?
Which one?
Is the unpressured fullback kick in, which I showed last night. So Adelaide, bloke runs out from fullback. right? So he gets a stat. That shouldn't be a possession, by the way. If you're a fullback kick in and you play on, that's not a possession. That's just to get the game going again. Anyway, he ran in from the fullback, the square, kicked it over the head of the pack, and it went out of bounds. No free kick. It should be a free kick because he's a fullback, first of all.
But he's played on.
No, which it used to be. But there's no difference. He's still a fullback bringing the ball back in.
Right.
If it goes out of bounds without being touched, should be a free kick. And he kicked it out of bounds. Every other bloke, any bloke these days playing footy can have 8 people hanging off him. Someone's got their finger in his eyes, one with the one up his nose, and he just gets his boot to ball and it dribbles out and they go, insufficient attempt.
It's a very, very difficult game to umpire. Bolton was done for 50 metres for pointing to the screen against Carlton. A couple of people have sent that through already a couple of weeks ago.
Dave from Launceston is exactly the person I'm talking about. So he's watching footy. He's going, okay, so Shea Bolton's been pinged 2 weeks ago. That's still the rule. Fair enough. He sits down yesterday to watch this game. He sees your mate Blake Hardwick drawing a picture for the umpire at the grandstand up on the scoreboard, and he goes, no 50.
What you need to probably do is just ask the umpires, what is your level of tolerance for this type of stuff today?
And that's a very good question but when it is as clear as someone pointing and we've been told, no, that's 50, then there's no tolerance needed. That's just, hey, you're pointing at the thing, that's 50, you pickle. But clearly Blake Hardwick hasn't got the message, and the umpire said, today I don't feel like giving it. That's how we're led to believe. I don't feel like giving it today, so I'm not going to. Okay. Next week I might.
Sydney have this rule up there. It's called the no
DH.
Yeah, the no DH rule, which applies to everybody up there. John Longmire explaining why Sam Wicks wasn't chosen to play at the weekend. Mind your own business. Was that sort of like the bottom line to all that?
This is
things happen in a football club and we don't need to explain them.
Yeah, and I've heard the story surrounding this, and it doesn't appear to be any. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it was more of a personal issue that ended up where 2 blokes got into a bit of an argument, a heated argument, and it was thought that the better sort of scenario would be to have Sam Wicks have a spell. But it is one of those ones where, now that level of detail, John Longmire can give as much detail to that as he wants or not, but that hasn't really answered the questions for people who are sitting there driving their car going, why didn't Sam Wicks play on the weekend?
And it was serious enough for them to drop him and not allow him to play at the weekend.
Yeah, well, they said to take the heat out of it where he and a teammate had a fair disagreement. And they thought, it's better for the team here. Our best chance of winning is to have one of these 2 boys not playing, and it was Sam Wicks.
Was there ever a time in your career where there was a disagreement between a player or players that threatened to disrupt the harmony of the team?
No, not that I can think of. Which is not to say the players didn't have differences of opinions, but never. I can't think of any that got to the point where it worried about the team. In fact, I can't even really think about where players had disagreements. Apart from sometimes on a boozy end of season trip.
Now the Brisbane Lions story, the way he played out.
There used to be blues on field in intra-club practice matches.
Yeah, always.
They were always
settled by the end of the game. I think. Yeah. What about the Brisbane Lions overseas trip? 0-3 start. Everyone puts it together, and then they find out that something may have happened on an end-of-season trip. Somebody said it was in Las Vegas. Apparently it wasn't Las Vegas. That part was wrong. It was somewhere else and involved players, social media. Somebody got hold of something back here in Australia, and then that led to a disconnect between some of the players and their partners or their family or whatever it might be.
Yep. They don't want to make it as an excuse, right? So why are we hell-bent on providing an excuse? This is what I can't get my head around, Tim. Brisbane are saying, no, we're playing poorly. Don't bring up something that we've dealt with or handled back in October, November. Don't bring that up now. We're not looking for an excuse. So why are the media looking for an excuse other than maybe that's the media's way in to be able to tell a story that involves, partners and all the trashy stuff that you read in the front pages of the paper?
Yeah, I guess in answer to that, playing devil's advocate, people are always looking for a reason why a team that played, say, in the grand final last year, and there's been a forensic microscope that's been on Collingwood's performance over the first 3 weeks of the season, where every part of it has been examined. And had this been the Collingwood Football Club, make no question or make no doubt about it, it would have been a conversation that was taking place publicly as well about the fact that, something happened in an end-of-season trip. People look for reasons why something happens. Why aren't they performing? Now, I think your answer is fine. Like, they're not saying that that's an excuse for their performance, but...
No, and if you made the calls that others have made, and I've got a really good example of this where I know someone was talking to someone about this when another media person come running in and said, what about this? This bloke's broken up with this girl, and that they're talking to that actual person.
Right.
And they said,
who are still very much together.
Who was sitting with their partner across the table. So this is how it all goes. Anyway, my point is this, Tim. When you're looking for reasons why a team's not playing, how far do you want to dig? And how much personal stuff do you want to go into if, in fact, I believe them, it's a non-story, but they're not going well. Let's dig into the private life of this person. Are they having a relation? Is this a problem here? Is it, what's going on in their life? Or is it just footy stuff?
I'll take you back, though, to, say, the Adelaide camp stuff, because that was a story at the time. And then the more we learnt about what took place, then the more we learnt that, yes, it did cause a disconnect within the football club.
Well, there was a hell of a lot to that, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
There was a lot there. So it was real. And that's a good example. So what you're saying is, we may find out in 6 months' time that there was something else there that Brisbane are not putting their hand up to.
Well, maybe they don't know about it.
Well, I don't think you can be as vehement as Danny Daly has been and as Harris Andrews has been if you think there's a chance that it can come back and bite you on the backside.
That's true, but that's why I'm just painting the picture. That's why people are suspicious of these things.
I guess you're right.